Let me share the screen 1 second. Okay. So, look, I have been asked to tell a little bit sort of the digital journey of Estonia. So the slides actually for the beginning of journey are the same anyway. Now lately it has been different, but why Estonia became interesting case first of all. It was internet penetration rates that distinguished Estonia from far richer countries and somehow proved the point that new technology is not only for the rich, but for those who want it. And if I don't have time to show all these slides, but let's say in turn of century, around 2000, Estonian internet penetration rate was 37%, and at the time I believe the German internet penetration rate was in low 20s, or the French or other these kind of wealthy Western European countries. And so it was kind of interesting to many. Okay, why do Estonians do it, and also where we got to with it. I remember, and I'm sort of the digital dinosaur, you could say, because I started to deal with these issues of e-government and how the digitization would change governance back in 1994. And at the time, my professors at McGill University in Montreal were telling me that, look, please, we are a serious university here. We don't want any of your crazy ideas. So it was really, I mean, nobody wanted it except in European Union. There was, well, at that time, it wasn't European Union, but European Commission had one German guy who was Martin Bangemann. He was previously had been a German Minister of Industry, and he had the idea that Europe is lagging behind United States, and therefore Europe has to also sort of push for this kind of transition to digital. And I remember the early years in 1990s that I had returned from Canada to Estonia, and we went to these conferences that this Martin Bangemann organized, Commissioner Bangemann, and so people were all talking excitedly about what the internet and these new technologies can do, but it was just talk. And what distinguished Estonia was really that Estonia actually started to do things. For example, we in 1997 announced Tiger Leap and to support ICT in schools, and we computerized all schools in Estonia. We connected all schools to internet. And we finished it by 1999. And I remember I was, at the time, I had a different hat. I was a politician. And I was, we were in a meeting in European Parliament with Tony Blair, and I was also in Social Democratic Party, so that's why this affiliation. There was this Party of European Socialist International Secretaries meeting, and Tony Blair was saying, oh, look, we are going to computerized schools. And it was actually, I was then kind of loud, and I told them that, look, really funny, we finished this, or we are finishing it in a couple of months' time. And I remember how everybody in the room was looking at me, who is this guy, what is he telling about? I mean, um, why, I mean, Estonia, former Soviet Republic, and talking about that. So the secret for it in some ways is that for politicians it was a political project. We wanted to get rid of this kind of label, former Soviet Republic. And it was very difficult because everybody was used to refer to us that way. But we started with these different things, and actually implemented some, like provided, like launching paying taxis online in 2000, or creating mobile parking, or starting to use digital signature. And I mean, the laws were there in other countries also, but somehow the step to be taken that this is how we do it was not done. So if we look, I mean, we put our cabinet meetings online in 2000. We got rid of papers, and now it is just modernized, but it is basically the same. But what it did was it caught the attention of others, and we quite consciously, of course, reinforced this message. But since I was sort of a participant in these events, I remember how difficult it was still in the first decade of this century to explain to people that, look, we are from Estonia, we are actually rather advanced with this. Maybe only when Skype was not born, I mean, it was born in 2002 or 2003, when we started to use it, but when it was sold first to eBay and then to Microsoft, then all of a sudden there was much more interest toward Estonia, and how can you do it, what are you doing, and so on. So let me just say that what is interesting in Estonian experience, I think, is that we had very little leadership in it, actually. We, for a decade, more than that, didn't have any even administrative sort of leader for this. It was, we created back in 1997 this kind of principles for Estonian information policy that was passed by the parliament. And that stipulated this kind of basic ideas how we go and towards this open standards and transparency and so on. But it wasn't really that much technology oriented. It was how the technology was to be used. And that was very successful, as we can see now. And at some point, people started to speak about e-Estonia and forgot that we were a poor former Soviet republic. So if we come to what is now the case, I mean, basically you can speak about everything already for 10 years, putting the E in front of it, whether it is energy, e-factory, e-school. It was interesting with these corona epidemics that it actually gave an additional push to use it, obviously, because people couldn't meet that much and had to be online. But it was kind of a justification that, oh, okay, we had these laws already before, but we weren't using one or another thing. When previously this E meant basically that all these systems were interoperable, and Estonia became famous by having this interoperability platform for all countries. Then later it was just this online interaction that many didn't really pay attention that it is something special. Because, for example, with the Skype system that I mentioned, I was giving lectures in Skype or presentations in Skype already 15 years ago. I think it was 2007 or something that I gave the first, or maybe even 2006, that I gave the first lecture to some other country via Skype because I couldn't travel, and it worked. But it becomes only, yes, this kind of conscious thing in 2020 with corona epidemics. But what are the sort of iconic things that Estonia did? One of these was creating this digital identity. And we had this national ID card and these digital databases. All were using this personal code of a person as sort of one of the architectural principles. So it was easy to check about the information. And for example, many countries are now talking about this principle of once only. I mean, it has become an EU principle. We introduced this already in 2007. So lots of things were happening, but let me just show sort of the ideas that we had. I mean, the people were already using basically computers when our thinking caught on with it, and but it was this Weberian sort of bureaucracy was going on, and people, officials were just talking to their back office or with the help of computers and local area networks. And what we did was we said, well, why shouldn't it be just talking to someone, or even better, talking to no one? I mean, just that there is a portal, and this through this portal, people can get the services, and that the way it has developed and has become famous. And it is quite interesting to see in the time how this has happened, and why it took place in some instances and why it was slow in another. And one of these, what I'm usually talking to, this kind of interrelated themes. One is sort of spider web of dependencies that is characterizing the public sector. And the second is the time factor, because when we do something, we think it is happening immediately, but in fact, it takes a long time. Just an example. Remember, I told you about paying taxes online. We started in 2000, and actually we got to 90% mark in 2009. So it took quite a number of years to get there, and quite a number of innovations also. You'd see a jump on the third year, 2002, and therefore 2004, when it started to accelerate. And the reason, for example, was that we started to use pre-filled declarations. It wasn't technology innovation, it was public sector innovation, or public authority behavioral innovation. We argued that why should people remember all these numbers if these numbers are already in the tax office? Because, for example, enterprises, businesses were paying the payroll taxes on behalf of people. So we said, well, let's use it. And at that time, in 2003, that was almost like an earthquake. There were lots of people who said, no, 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 no. People need to have the paper and discipline to enter these numbers themselves and all this. But in fact, this public sector innovation rationale won out and has been serving us quite well. One of the things that has brought a lot of fame to Estonia has been internet voting. This is due to from one side, this digital identity and all the digital databases that allow to do it. But again, if you look at it, the first year in 2005, it was 1.9% of voters. In 2011, it was quarter of the voters. Now it has been settled more or less in 36-38% of range. So still, most of the people don't vote over internet, but a lot of them do, of course. But the things should be seen in time and not waited, oh, it is happening right now. So just to wrap up maybe some of the driving forces and understanding how it came. There was this leadership and political will from the outset. There were fixed info-political principles that allowed the development even without clear leadership in terms of having a director or minister for IT to do things. There was always a drive toward good telecom infrastructure and e-banking, and that was something we were really in 1991 to the level of Moldova or Macedonia, whatever. I mean, with maybe 2 phones per 100, like in sub-Saharan Africa was just recently still. But what we did in 91 and where we can actually start counting all this was we privatized telco, and that was a mistake, you know, and but life is a little bit kind of built on the mistakes. The mistake was that when Estonian Telecom was privatized, they forgot to include the obscure thing called internet. So internet was free. Everything else was regulated and given for 10 years to raise the revenue and I mean this for the telco. But the internet was left out, and therefore internet started to develop very rapidly. And clearly also this interoperable ICT architecture was important. And when we look at what has happened lately in Estonia, then it is just adding to this. It has all this e-government has become basically just a reality, the way how we live, and you know, you add some interesting moments. In 2014, we added e-residency, meaning that we argued that these electronic services could be consumed not only by Estonian citizens, because Estonian citizens had ID card, but also the residents. And then it took off on its own and became quite an interesting landmark. Then there was in 2015 like data embassies. Estonia being a small country in a neighborhood which is currently also rather worried about the eastern side of our border, thought that, okay, how do we preserve it? Everything is online already. How do we preserve it if somebody comes with bad intentions to Estonia? And so we created this idea that Estonian government data, the public data, is kept also in other countries. And in case of whatever attacks, it still is kept intact. And it is important because already in 2007, we stipulated in our legislation the primacy of digital documents. I mean, the digital data in government databases. So we said that if there is a discrepancy basically between the something that is written on the paper and something that is in government registry, then the government registry has a primacy. So that's why we have to defend this data also, and it's quite important, of course, throughout this. And well, one of the last things that is really cool, and I don't know if I mean you have come across these ID cards that I told you, and digital ID had a physical carrier. There was a place for the chip. First it was this card, then it was a mobile ID with SIM card. But now we have developed what we call a smart ID, and it's started already some 5 years ago. And it is also quite much used in Latvia, Lithuania. And it's really convenient because it doesn't need, you don't need any physical carrier for that, but you can still give all the, not only the authentication, but also digital signature that is valid in the court of law. So there are these things coming up, new ones. I understood you wanted also maybe one couple of sentences about local government and how the interaction was. Back in 1990s, local governments took actually the lead. And it was at that time, well, not all the local governments, but the big ones, of course, the Tallinn and Tartu municipalities. I remember, for example, how my students in 1997 were creating home pages for Tartu municipality as a coursework in one of my classes, and it was the first local government website. It was a question of enthusiasm and not the money. Also, the local government was quicker to react to many things, like this digital identity. Actually, the initial, it started from Tallinn municipality creating some citizen, counting the citizens partially. and the government taking over their database to launch the government solution. But then, of course, the central government took over and started to create solutions first for itself or for everybody, also to the local government. But then around 2010, also specifically for local government. And I mean, now it is all these are well known, but we had already 10 years ago this kind of local government council meetings via video feed, for example, and things like that. You can read about this e-Estonia story. It is now, there is a lot of things documented and you find it online. But in short, that is this kind of overview of some of the steps. But there is a rich history now already behind. Thank you.